At an upscale Charlotte City eatery, a young black waitress quietly clears tables, her aspirations of becoming a concert pianist veiled by the clang of crockery and polite smiles. However, the arrival of a wealthy, arrogant businessman with his sharp tongue and cruel antics thrusts her into the spotlight, challenging her to prove her worth. Unbeknownst to him, beneath her uniform and composed demeanor lies a talent potent enough to captivate a room. As she takes her seat at the grand piano, the evening takes an unforeseen turn. It was a bustling Saturday evening at the Meridian, an opulent restaurant nestled in the heart of Charlotte, North Carolina. The atmosphere hummed with vitality, a symphony of clinking glasses, hushed conversations, and the gentle strains of jazz emanating from the grand piano in the corner. Chandeliers overhead cast a golden luminescence, reflecting off polished silverware and crystal goblets. It was a venue where affluence and sophistication intertwined, and the air practically vibrated with exclusivity. Among the waitstaff, gracefully navigating the labyrinth of tables, was Jana Lewis, a 24-year-old waitress with smooth, warm brown skin and profound, expressive eyes that hinted at untold narratives. She moved with practiced elegance, balancing trays and smiles as if born to orchestrate the chaos. Yet, despite her serene exterior, Jana's heart beat to a distinct rhythm, a cadence far removed from the clatter of dishes and the drone of idle chatter. Music. It had always been music for her. Since childhood, growing up in a modest Atlanta, Georgia neighborhood, Jana had found solace in the keys of a well-worn upright piano, a gift from a kind neighbor. While other children played tag outdoors, she would sit on the creaky wooden bench, her fingers dancing over the keys, emulating melodies heard on the radio. It wasn't long before she advanced from simple tunes to classical compositions discovered in secondhand music books. Her mother, Lisa Lewis, a tireless nurse who frequently worked double shifts, had been her staunchest advocate. Lisa had little to offer in material wealth, certainly not piano lessons or lavish instruments, but she bestowed upon Jana her unwavering belief. "Music is your gift, baby," her mother often affirmed. "Don't let anyone take that away from you." But dreams didn't cover expenses. By the time Jana reached 18, life's practicalities began to encroach. College scholarships hadn't materialized, and with rent obligations and younger siblings to support, her aspirations of becoming a professional pianist receded into the background. She carefully stored her sheet music and entered the workforce, exchanging recitals and performances for aprons and serving trays. And yet the dream never entirely extinguished. When Jana relocated to Charlotte 2 years prior, the Meridian wasn't merely a job, it was an opportunity. She had been drawn to the gleaming grand piano in the dining room's corner, a potent symbol of something she couldn't quite relinquish. Though her shifts left scant time for practice, she occasionally stole moments in the deserted restaurant after hours, allowing her fingers to caress the keys, simply to remind herself that music still resided within her. Tonight, as she navigated through the throng, delivering cocktails and clearing plates, Jana stole a glance at the piano. Its lustrous black surface gleamed under the soft illumination, and a pang of yearning constricted her chest. It felt so close, yet impossibly distant, like a dream encased behind glass. She dismissed the thought. Focus. It was just another Saturday night and there were tables to attend to. But then the door swung open and Marcus Belmont entered. Heads turned as Marcus crossed the threshold, the crisp click of his Italian leather shoes piercing the low hum. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and impeccably attired in a custom-tailored suit that practically exuded affluence. His salt and pepper hair was swept back in a manner that appeared both effortless and deliberate. A Rolex gleamed on his wrist, catching the light as he casually raised a hand to acknowledge the maitre d'. Trailing behind him were 3 companions, 2 men and 1 woman, all equally refined and radiating an aura of wealth and privilege. The maitre d' greeted them with practiced charm, escorting them to one of the establishment's prime tables, situated near the piano. Jana didn't require an introduction to Marcus. His name was practically legendary among the staff, a wealthy investor with a sharp tongue and a propensity for making servers uncomfortable. Some whispered he enjoyed provoking people simply to observe their reactions, a pastime made all too effortless by the substantial influence and financial leverage he wielded like armor. She straightened her posture and affixed her most professional smile as she approached their table. "Good evening," she said smoothly. Welcome to the Meridian. May I begin with some drinks? Marcus barely acknowledged her. Instead, he vaguely gestured toward the menu, already engrossed in a conversation with one of his companions about stock portfolios and luxury real estate. Jana observed the way he dominated the space, his voice carrying just a bit too loudly, his laughter sharp and rehearsed. She had encountered men like him before, men who perceived waitstaff not as individuals, but as mere accessories in their personal theatrics. But tonight she reminded herself he was just another table. Or so she believed. As Jana turned to depart, Marcus's voice cut through the air, halting her. "Jana, is it?" he inquired, glancing at her name tag. She turned back, her smile still firmly in place. "Yes, sir." He leaned back in his chair, his eyes scrutinizing her in a way that made her skin tingle. "You seem like someone with concealed talents," he remarked, his words imbued with feigned intrigue. "What else do you engage in when you're not carrying trays?" Jana felt her stomach clench. "I play piano sometimes," she answered cautiously, hoping to divert his attention. Marcus's lips curved into a smirk, and his companions exchanged amused glances. "A pianist, huh?" Marcus scoffed. "Well, isn't that fascinating? Perhaps you'll favor us with a brief performance later." Jana forced a polite laugh. "Oh, I'm just here to work tonight." But Marcus wasn't finished. "Oh, come on," he pressed, his voice now louder, attracting attention from nearby tables. "Surely you wouldn't let an opportunity like this slip by? Or," he let the sentence hang, his tone turning sharp, "are you all talk and no talent?" The comment landed like a physical blow and Jana felt her cheeks flush. She longed to walk away, to pretend she hadn't heard him, but the weight of his challenge and the gazes of the room held her captive. Her fingers tingled and her heart pounded. She glanced at the piano. It gleamed under the lights, both inviting and intimidating. Suddenly her mother's words echoed in her mind. "Don't let anyone take that away from you." Jana straightened her shoulders, her voice steady but subdued. "Fine," she declared. "I'll play." The room hushed, anticipation palpable in the air as Jana approached the piano. The space seemed to contract as Jana walked toward the instrument, her footsteps faintly echoing against the polished floors. She could feel the weight of dozens of eyes following her, curious, skeptical, expectant. The grand piano, with its sleek black finish and ivory keys, sat like a prized jewel in the corner, illuminated by the warm glow of a nearby chandelier. It was exquisite yet formidable, and as Jana neared it, it felt less like an invitation and more like an ordeal. Marcus leaned back in his chair, a self-satisfied smirk playing on his lips. His companions, too, were grinning, clearly relishing the spectacle about to unfold. To them this wasn't music. It was entertainment. Jana hesitated for a brief moment before gracefully sliding onto the bench. Her palms were damp, and her fingers trembled almost imperceptibly as they hovered above the keys. Memories flooded back. The late nights practicing on the worn upright piano in her childhood home, the calluses on her fingertips, the hours spent pursuing perfection. But this wasn't her living room. This wasn't a recital or a church gathering filled with familiar, supportive faces. This was something entirely different. She exhaled slowly, her mother's voice a whisper in her mind. "Don't let anyone take that away from you." Her fingers pressed down gently, and the first note resonated, a tentative, delicate sound that seemed almost too fragile to fill the expansive space. She allowed it to linger, granting herself a moment to acclimate to the feel of the keys beneath her fingers, to settle into the rhythm of the moment. A few patrons shifted in their seats, exchanging dubious glances. Marcus raised an eyebrow, his expression oscillating between amusement and impatience. But Jana wasn't observing him. She closed her eyes and let her fingers move. The melody began to materialize, a soulful rendition of Debussy's Clair de Lune. The opening notes were tender and intimate, weaving through the room like a hushed secret. The murmur of conversations began to subside as the melody expanded and unfolded into something richer, something profound. The tension in Jana's shoulders began to dissipate. Her hands moved more freely, more confidently, and the music seemed to acquire a life of its own. Each note poured forth like a confession, a narrative of yearning, of sacrifice, of dreams postponed but never forgotten. The audience felt it. A profound silence descended upon the room, so complete that the sound of the piano seemed to reverberate in the stillness. Even the clinking of glasses and silverware had ceased. Waiters paused in their tracks. Diners leaned forward in their seats, their eyes riveted on the woman at the piano. Marcus too had fallen silent. His smirk had vanished, replaced by something else, something uncomfortably akin to doubt. But Jana didn't perceive it. Her eyes remained closed as her fingers moved fluidly, the music swelling and cascading in waves. She played not merely to fill the room but to fill the void within herself, the space that had been empty for too long. She thought of her mother, of the nights spent alone at the piano, pursuing the sound of something she couldn't quite articulate, of the years spent waiting tables, wondering if her dreams had been too grand, too unattainable. And she allowed it all to pour out. By the time the final note resonated, the room was utterly silent. For a heartbeat there was nothing but stillness. Then applause. It began as a murmur, then swelled into a thunderous ovation. People stood clapping and cheering. Some discreetly wiped at their eyes, visibly moved by what they had just witnessed. Jana sat frozen, her hands still resting lightly on the keys, her heart pounding so intensely she thought it might drown out the sound of the applause. And then she turned. Marcus sat rigid in his chair, his hands clasped together, his knuckles white and his expression unreadable. His companions no longer appeared amused. Instead they exchanged uncertain glances, clearly unsure how to react. Finally Marcus clapped slowly. The sound was hollow, almost reluctant, and it rang false against the sincerity of the crowd's cheers. "Well," he stated loud enough to pierce the applause, "that was unexpected." The words hung awkwardly in the air and Jana met his gaze with quiet steadfastness. She didn't smile, didn't gloat. She simply stood, smoothing her apron and stepping away from the piano. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice wasn't loud but it carried. The applause began to subside, replaced by murmurs of admiration as Jana made her way back toward the server station. She could feel the eyes on her, but this time they didn't feel like judgment. They felt like recognition. Behind her, Marcus shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable under the weight of the moment he had orchestrated but could no longer control. And for the first time that night Jana felt liberated. The applause finally began to fade, but its reverberation lingered in the air, enveloping Jana like a protective shield. She walked back toward the server station, her hands still trembling slightly from the adrenaline, but her head held high. The piano's final note still resonated in her ears, a reminder that she had confronted the storm and emerged unscathed. She didn't dare look back at Marcus just yet, not because she feared him, but because she knew without needing to see that the balance of power had shifted. Her coworkers greeted her with wide eyes and quiet nods of approval. Maya, a fellow waitress and one of Jana's closest friends, slipped beside her as she reached the server station. "Girl," Maya whispered, her voice barely containing her excitement, "I didn't know you could do that." Jana smiled faintly, still trying to catch her breath. Neither did they. Maya glanced toward Marcus's table and smirked. "Especially him." Jana finally allowed herself to look back. Marcus sat rigid in his chair, his fingers drumming lightly on the table. His smirk had completely vanished, replaced by something harder to decipher, discomfort, perhaps even regret, though his carefully composed expression attempted to conceal it. His companions looked equally uneasy, shifting in their seats as if the chairs had suddenly become too confining. Marcus's gaze flickered toward Jana, and for a brief moment their eyes met. She held his stare not defiantly but steadily, as if daring him to utter what they both knew he couldn't. He looked away first. But Marcus wasn't one to concede defeat so easily. He leaned back in his chair, gesturing to a waiter for another drink, and forced a chuckle loud enough to be heard. "Well," he declared, his voice cutting through the low murmur of resumed conversation, "looks like we've got a hidden gem in the staff." "Who you?" The words were intended to reclaim control, to diminish what had just transpired, but they fell flat. No one laughed. Even his companions didn't follow his lead. The woman seated next to him, Samantha, with her perfectly styled hair and diamond earrings, fiddled with her napkin, avoiding eye contact. One of the men cleared his throat and took a sip of wine, clearly wishing to disappear. Marcus's forced bravado had no audience and Jana knew it. She stepped forward then, approaching their table with the same composure she'd exhibited moments earlier at the piano. This time, however, she wasn't holding a tray, just her presence, steady and unshakable. Is there anything else I can get for you? She asked, her voice calm and professional. Marcus looked up at her and for the first time he seemed to hesitate. His confidence, so effortless earlier, now felt strained, like a mask beginning to crack. No, he said finally, his tone clipped. He picked up his glass of whiskey, swirling it absently. We're fine. Good, Jana said, offering a polite nod before turning to leave. But then one of Marcus's companions spoke up. That was incredible, said James, the youngest in the group. He leaned forward, his expression earnest. I mean it. I've never heard anything like that. Jana paused, surprised by his sincerity. Thank you. No, seriously, he continued, ignoring the sharp look Marcus shot him. You've got real talent. Are you pursuing music professionally? Jana hesitated, the question striking closer than she expected. Not yet, she admitted, her voice quieter now. But I hope to. James nodded, clearly impressed. You should. Don't let this place keep you. Marcus stiffened. James, he said sharply, but the younger man ignored him. Jana offered a small smile. Thank you. I appreciate that. And with that she walked away, leaving Marcus to stew in the remnants of his shattered ego. The remainder of the night passed in a blur, but the energy in the room never quite reverted to what it had been before Jana's performance. The tension around Marcus's table lingered, heavy and unspoken, while other patrons stopped Jana as she moved between tables to offer quiet words of admiration. You're gifted, an older woman whispered as Jana poured her coffee. Don't waste it. You should be on a stage, said another man, slipping her a tip that was far more generous than necessary. Each comment added a layer of warmth to the confidence Jana had felt at the piano, but it was the look on Marcus's face, the realization that no amount of money or power could undo what had happened, that stayed with her most. As the night wound down, Marcus and his group departed without fanfare. No loud goodbyes, no lingering drinks, just a swift retreat, as though staying any longer would only prolong their humiliation. But as Marcus passed Jana on his way out, he paused. You made your point, he said quietly, his voice low enough that only she could hear. Jana met his eyes, her expression steady. It was never about making a point, she said softly. I just wanted to play. Marcus said nothing and then he walked away. Later that night, as Jana helped close down the restaurant, Maya approached her with wide eyes and a grin. You're not going to believe this, she said, waving her phone. That guy in the corner booth, the one who clapped the loudest? He's a producer. A real producer. And he wants to talk to you. Jana froze. What? Maya nodded, practically bouncing on her toes. I overheard him asking the manager about you. He wants you to record a demo. For the first time all night, Jana felt her composure crack. She laughed, a soft, disbelieving sound, and sank onto one of the empty chairs. Demo. A chance. Her fingers twitched, already aching to play again. And as she sat there, surrounded by the fading hum of the night, Jana realized something. This wasn't the conclusion of her story, it was merely the genesis. The gentle hum of closing time settled over the meridian. Tables were meticulously wiped clean, chairs neatly stacked, and the last echoes of conversation faded as the final patrons exited. Jana stood near the bar, her apron folded in her hands, her mind still reeling from Maya's revelation. Demo. She had envisioned this moment for years, long restless nights spent picturing herself in a recording studio, headphones enveloping her ears, her fingers dancing over the keys. But now that the possibility was tangible, it felt surreal, as if she might awaken at any second and find herself back in her tiny apartment, her fingers brushing the chipped keys of her second-hand piano. Maya's voice jolted her from her reverie. You okay? Jana blinked and looked up. Maya was observing her carefully, her brow furrowed with concern. Yeah, Jana said quickly, but even she didn't sound convinced. I wasn't expecting this. Maya grinned and nudged her shoulder. You better start expecting it, girl. That performance tonight, you didn't just play the piano, you commanded it. And you saw how people reacted. That producer wasn't the only one impressed. Jana's smile faltered, her doubts creeping back in. But what if it's just talk? What if nothing comes of it? Maya crossed her arms. What if it does? What if this is the genesis of something monumental and you're too afraid to seize it? The words struck Jana profoundly, for she knew Maya was right. Fear had always been her greatest adversary, Fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear that her dreams were too ambitious for someone like her. But tonight had been different. Tonight she had confronted that fear and triumphed. Before she could respond, the restaurant manager, Mr. Caldwell, approached. He was a no-nonsense man in his early 50s, always impeccably dressed and intimidating in a way that made the staff stand straighter whenever he entered a room. But tonight, his usually stern face softened as he stopped in front of Jana. "Miss Lewis," he said, addressing her formally in a way that caught her off guard, "I don't normally make a habit of commenting on performances, but what you did tonight, that was truly extraordinary." Jana opened her mouth to respond, but he raised a hand. "I've already spoken to the producer who was here," he continued. "He left his card and asked that I pass it along to you." He reached into his pocket and handed her a small, sleek business card with embossed lettering. "Nathan Riley, music producer, Riley Company Productions." Jana's fingers trembled as she took the card, her eyes scanning the name repeatedly as if attempting to commit it to memory. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Mr. Caldwell nodded, but his expression turned serious. "This could be significant for you, Jana, but I need you to consider it carefully. Opportunities like this don't arise often, and once you take that step there's no turning back." She met his gaze and for the first time that night, felt something akin to certainty settle in her chest. "I know," she said. "I'm ready." Later that night, Jana sat alone in her small apartment, the producer's card resting on the coffee table in front of her. She stared at it as if it might vanish if she looked away for too long. Her old upright piano stood against the wall, its surface worn and its keys slightly yellowed from age. It wasn't much, but it had been there through every triumph and tribulation, every late-night practice session, every tear-soaked moment of self-doubt. She ran her fingers gently over the keys, pressing down softly to play a single note. The sound filled the room, soft and imperfect, but it was hers. The weight of the night pressed down on her. What if she wasn't skilled enough? What if the producer changed his mind? And then she thought about Marcus, about the way he had attempted to diminish her, how he had underestimated her, dismissed her, and how with nothing but her talent and her courage she had reversed the situation. She couldn't allow doubt to prevail, not again. Taking a deep breath, she picked up her phone and dialed the number on the card. It rang twice before a smooth, professional voice answered. "This is Nathan Riley." Jana swallowed hard, her voice shaking only slightly. "Hi, Mr. Riley, this is Jana Lewis from the Meridian." There was a brief pause, then a warm, enthusiastic response. "Jana, I was hoping you'd call. I haven't stopped thinking about your performance tonight. Are you free to meet next week? I'd love to discuss what we can achieve together." Her heart skipped. "Yes, I'd love that." They arranged a time and place, and as Jana hung up the phone, she couldn't suppress the smile that spread across her face. The following week at the Meridian felt different. Patrons greeted Jana with smiles and compliments, and even her coworkers treated her with newfound respect. But Marcus Belmont's absence was the most conspicuous change. Word had spread about what had transpired, and though Marcus was renowned for his pride, it seemed he had chosen to avoid returning to the scene of his humiliation. His absence was as conspicuous as his presence had been, and Jana couldn't help but feel a quiet satisfaction in knowing she had left an indelible impression. James, Marcus's younger companion, did return. He stopped by one evening specifically asking for Jana. "I just wanted to say thank you," he told her, "for reminding me that people like him don't always get the last word." Jana smiled. "Sometimes it's not about words," she said. "Sometimes it's about what you do." On her final night at the Meridian, Jana played one last song on the grand piano after closing time. This time it wasn't out of fear or defiance but out of gratitude, for the lessons, the struggles, and the courage she had discovered within herself. As the last note lingered in the empty room, she closed the piano lid and stood, ready to step into whatever lay ahead. She wasn't merely a waitress anymore. She wasn't just a dreamer. She was an artist, and the world was finally prepared to listen.